I call the member for Warringah.
The 6 principles underlying the Australian Constitution should be well known. Democracy, the rule of law, separation of powers, federalism, nationhood and rights. These principles protect what we as Australians hold most dear, and they ensure that the framework within which the Commonwealth Government operates is robust, fair and above lawful. I therefore find it galling that we as the crossbench are here today to highlight that our government, in fact, is in constant disregard of 2 of these principles. We all know that democracy isn't perfect. Perhaps Winston Churchill said it best, speaking in the British House of Commons after the defeat of fascist Nazi regime in World War II. He said, "No one pretends that democracy is perfect or all-wise. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all those other forms that have been tried." Our democracy is precious, a form of government where the people have the authority to choose their governing legislators and therefore influence legislation. Our democracy is hard fought for and is what ensures our views and values as Australians are properly represented. Similarly, the rule of law is a cornerstone of our system of governance. It promotes the ideal that every person is subject to the laws of our land, regardless of their power or position. It also infers that individuals cannot have their rights eroded and cannot be punished unless they have been found to be in breach of the law after a proper judicial process. According to the Australian Constitution Centre, a newly established education centre at the High Court of Australia, the rule of law gives us a predictable and ordered society. It promotes justice, fairness and individual freedom. The rule of law provides a shield against the arbitrary exercise of power. As my fellow crossbenchers have already highlighted, examples of how these principles have been disregarded are shamefully frequent. Examples in the recent past include dubious political advertising, where truth and fairness, foundations of healthy democracy, are set aside for lies and misinformation. Constant restrictions on the freedom of the press, where asking legitimate questions of government results in police raids on homes and newsrooms, and threats and arrests of imprisonment. The failure of this government to protect the rights of Australian citizens like Julian Assange. The dubious awarding of contracts to government supporters. The misappropriation of government funds with the recent sports rot scandal, where much-needed funds for local sporting groups are redirected to projects that provided political benefit for the government. The offshore processing of refugees, which has been criticised by the United Nations and various international legal entities. We have kept refugees in detention for 7 years in contravention of international laws. So don't speak about rights and all citizens being equal. The political stacking of government bodies and important pseudo-legal bodies, such as the Administrative Appeals Tribunal and Sydney Harbour Federation Trust, and major mining approvals granted just days before the federal election. And the list is endless. It is embarrassing and it is dangerous, because with every scandal, with every example of blatant disregard for democracy and the rule of law, the public loses more and more trust in all of us. They lose faith in their democracy and they lose trust in their politicians. In a recent report entitled Democracy 2025, the Museum of Australian Democracy details recent findings. The research shows that members of parliament in general are distrusted by nearly half of the population, and government ministers are distrusted by 48% of respondents and only trusted to some degree by 23%. And the report comes to the following shocking conclusion, that by 2025, if nothing is done and the current trend continues, fewer than 10% of Australians will trust their politicians and political institutions, resulting in ineffective and illegitimate government, declining social and economic well-being. This is not just about being liked or being trusted. It's an erosion of our social and economic well-being. I call on this government to introduce a National Integrity Commission with a broad jurisdiction, an ability for direct referral, strong investigative powers and the ability to hold public hearings. It is in all of our duties to restore faith in politicians.
I call the member for